countless titans placed upon the face of the earth 3 generations of men. The first of them being men of gold. Becoming too close to gods themselves, Cronus ended their time on earth with an eternal sleep. A second generation came to be, the men of silver. Unwilling to serve the titans and make sacrifices upon the holy altars, as all men shall do, they were condemned to dwell under the earth for all eternity. Finally, a third generation, the men of bronze, a brazen race, sprung from the ash tree, terrible and strong are they. Join me as I tell you the tales of the men of bronze. This is Dragon's Blood. Beware Brontes, episode 30. That evening, the physician and Ahirom walked to the cookhouse for their sup. Minkari's healing arts transformed Ahirom from a skeleton to a young man again. Having been starved for so long, his hair had fallen out, but now fuzz was sprouting from his scalp and the rest of his body, making him itchy and forcing him to scratch everywhere. His green toga, leather girdle, sandals were all new and comfortable. He looked and felt like a new man. His brown eyes sparkled in the evening sun. Breathing deeply, the scented air filled his lungs, and the joy of being free from the horrors of the lair left him brimming with vitality. His nose, once straight, now crooked from the abuse at the hands of his captors in Azerta. When Ahirom and the physician entered the cookhouse, Gamden noticed them, stood up, and walked across the room to greet them. Standing before them, Gamden held out his hand in friendship. Ahirom dropped to his knees, took Gamden's hand, kissed it gently, and wept openly. The cookhouse went silent at the emotional release. Gamden blushed, looked about the room, then said softly, "On your feet, Ahirom." Through a cracked voice, Ahirom responded, You saved me from that hell. My life is yours. I owe you everything." Gamden said softly again, "On your feet, Ahirom." Slowly he stood. Gamden took his wrist in hand, embraced him and said, "Your life is yours. You owe me nothing." Ahirom wept. Gamden led the way back to the table, and the cookhouse returned to normal. Ahirom was the first to greet him, held out his hand and said, "Welcome back to the land of the living." Wide-eyed, Ahirom responded, "Mighty priest of Athena, you carried me away from the lair of death and back into the realm of the living. I was reborn at that moment. My life is forfeit to all of you." Sunisret stood from his chair, held out his hand in friendship and said, "You are a new man. I barely recognized you." Ahirom followed Sunisret with his gaze as he stood to his full height. With awe in his voice, Ahirom said, "You are as tall as the woman under Minkari's care." Taking Sunisret's massive hand and wrist in his, he marveled at the giant before him. With the mention of the woman, Sunisret asked, "What do you know of the woman? What can you tell me about her? Is she better? Is she awake?" Ahirom, visibly weakened, swayed on his feet. The physician took him by the shoulders and guided him to a nearby chair, saying, "You are still weak and need to conserve your strength. Sit and rest." Flagging down a serving boy, water was brought quickly. Ahirom's eyes came back into focus, and he regained his composure. "Sorry about that." He took a big drink and continued, "To answer your question, Sunisret, I can't tell you much. I slept most of the time, as did the woman. He paused to give his legs a good scratching. I did hear them talking a couple of times, but it was in a language that I've never heard before. Scratching his head in thought, he added, "Her left hand is missing. I heard Minkari say that the men of silver cut it off. They would have eaten me too." He shivered at the thought of it. "I hope I get to meet her soon," Sunsret said to no one in particular. "You really think that she has information about who you are?" asked Gamden. Coming out of his reverie and looking at everyone, one at a time, Sunsret replied, "I'm so different from everyone else in the Three Kingdoms. My father never told me much about where we came from, and he died when I was young. I'm sure she is here for a reason." "I think you're right," responded Ahirom. "When Minkari and I were talking, he said you were traveling to Azerta." "I escaped from Azerta. That can't just be a coincidence." Gamden and Ahirom looked at each other in disbelief. Sunsret broke the silence by asking, "Will we take him with us?" "I'm willing to go back," said Ahirom as he scratched his forearm. "I made some good friends during my time there. I told them that if I escaped, I would do everything I could to free them. That's if they're still alive. Brontes would kill just for the pleasure of it." Ahirom looked at Gamden and said, "It's up to you." Sitting back in his chair, Gamden pondered the idea for a moment, then said, "You're right, Ahirom. Nothing on this journey is happening by accident. The gods have plans for all of us. I have no objections. What about you, Ahirom?" "Yes, he must come with us," agreed Ahirom. "You found a way out, and that is our way in." "How did you get out?" inquired Gamden. "And how did you end up at the lair of the Men of Silver?" "I'll tell you how I got out tonight." Ahirom scratched his beard for a moment, then continued, "But how I got to the lair is a story for another night." Food was brought to the table, and between mouthfuls, Ahirom explained how he escaped. "I was part of a work detail at the quarry where we would cut new stones for the fortress walls. I found a recess between two large boulders, and inside were a handful of scrolls. Later that day, I made an excuse to go back and read the scrolls. In the short time that I had to myself, I looked them over. Just diplomatic letters, but one told of an empty aquifers that run under Azerta. The entrance to the aquifer is a dried-up well between the first and second walls of the fortress." "How did you end up at Azerta?" interrupted Gamden. "I will tell you that story over a cup of wine after dinner." Ahirom continued with his escape. "I took the scroll with me, memorized it that night, and burned it. 2 days later, I got away from the work gang and ran for the well. In my haste, I didn't have a torch. The scroll said it was a 2-league journey." Ahirom laughed at his own foolishness. "If you have a torch, the trek wouldn't take all that long. It was absolute darkness down there. On my hands and knees all the way, feeling for drop-offs and what have you." His meal finished, Ahirom sat back in his chair and finished with, "It felt like it took 2 days to get out of there. Might have been longer. I just don't know." Gamden and Ahirom looked at each other in amazement, then asked at the same time, "You do remember how to find the way back into the aquifers, right?" Ahirom laughed out loud and said, "I'll never forget that. Glorious sunlight. I can take you right back to that spot. Guaranteed. Their meal finished, the dishes were cleared, and wine was poured for all. Ahirom stood, raised his glass in salute. By the grace of Zeus, may our travels be swift and safe. The party raised their glasses, then drank their fill. The party talked among themselves for a while, until Gamden asked Ahirom, "You are going to tell us why you are at Azerta." "Yes, I will tell you," he answered as he scratched the back of his neck. "I'm getting tired, so I'll try and keep my tale short. My father was near death, and my greedy brother hired 2 thugs to kidnap me and sell me into slavery, to take what is mine by birthright. I remember being taken to the docks, where I was put into shackles and thrown into the bowels of a slaver's ship. I can't be sure how many days we spent on the sea, but we made many stops, where more and more people were taken as slaves." Sitting back in his chair, Ahirom sighed from recalling his voyage of misery. "I toiled for many weeks in Dionysidoros, being sold from one slave owner to the next. Then one day, a large swarthy man with a hooked nose appeared and bought as many men and women and children as his carts would hold. I was one of them." Anger brewing in his heart, Ahirom slammed his fist on the table, swore his oath once again. "I will sacrifice 7 goats unto Zeus, if he finds it in his divine wisdom to grant me my revenge for this injustice." After a short pause, he continued, "It took us a fortnight to travel to Azerta. Many people died. When they did, their bodies were thrown to the side of the road. I tell you, those Eastern men have no souls. They're demons. Finally, we arrived at the fortress. We were pressed into service that same day. Those that couldn't stand were killed on the spot. I guess I survived because I'm young and healthy." "The gods are with you, Ahirom," Gamden remarked. "Any other man would have surely perished. Zeus will grant you your revenge." Lifting his cup, Gamden saluted. "We drink to your long life." The party cheered in agreement and continued the festivities into the evening. Look for episode 31 of Dragon's Blood, Beware Brontes, on YouTube.